candidate will have 60 seconds to make an opening statement, and then I will begin asking the questions that were generated by you. Each candidate will answer each question. Answers are limited to 60 seconds. We have a timekeeper. So raise your hand so they can see where the timekeeper is. And she will tell you when you are halfway through and when you have to stop. Then each candidate, at the end of the forum, each candidate will have 90 seconds for a concluding statement, and we will end this by 3:30. And for those of you in the audience who know me, you know I do things on time. So now we will begin with opening statements, and we'll start with Murray.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you in DeKalb stands for having us here. My name is Amy Murray Brio, and I'm running to be the next congressperson for the 16th Congressional District. It has been apparent every day in the last 16 months that elections have consequences. And we have watched as the Trump administration has tried to destroy everything that was done during the Obama administration for 8 years. But more than that, destroy the fundamental values of our nation. And our current representative, Adam Kinzinger, is right in line with Donald Trump. We need someone in Washington who understands how to build diverse coalitions, not someone who wants politics as usual. It is time for a change, for someone to hear your voice and act on it. I look forward to discussing the issues with you today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Dady. I'd like to be your congresswoman here in the 16th. I'm from Rockford. I grew up in the 16th Congressional District, and I still live in it after the redistrict. I went away for my education after my mother died from a preventable illness because she didn't have access to medical care. I chose to move back to Rockford because I wanted my children to go to the same public schools I went to and be in the same 4-H club, and they do. I started my immigration law practice out of the living room of my house, and a decade later, I've got the largest immigration law firm west of Chicagoland in downtown Rockford with 12 employees. We deserve accessible, active, and accountable representation in this district. Representation that knows the value of investing in our greatest resource, people. Thank you.
So thank you, of course, to DeKalb stands, and for you all for being here. My name is Neil Mohammed, and when I was growing up in DeKalb, I remember that in the old library building, the children's section was on the ground floor, and it opened up onto 2nd Street. And I remember my mom would park the car, and I would jump out and run inside the dinosaur section, because if there was something out there that was new about the Triceratops, I was going to be first in line for it. 30-odd years later, here I am in the grown-up section. I didn't start in the middle class. I only got to where I am today because of public schools, daycare, school lunch programs, government loans for college, and all the rest. So I'm running for Congress because I want those same opportunities to be available to a new generation of American kids, Illinois kids, and kids in the 16th District in particular. Because it's those opportunities that the Republican agenda is designed to take away from us. That didn't start with Trump, it started with people like Paul Ryan and Adam Kinzinger, and that's why they have to go.
My name's Beth Vercolio-Osmond, and I am running to unseat Adam Kinzinger. I'm a farmer and a small business owner. I have been a corporate trainer and a special education teacher. My background is wide, and my roots are deep. I am from Ottawa, Illinois. I went to school here at NIU, and I'm back in Ottawa raising my children and running my business. And the reason I think I am the best person to represent the Democrats in the November election is because of those roots and those connections that I bring to connect with the voters of the 16th district and the swing voters that we are going to need in order to achieve our goal, which is unseating Adam Kinzinger. So I ask for your support, I ask for your vote, and I thank you very much for being here today to hear all of us.
Before I ask the first question, let me tell you that if you think of something as we're going along, raise your hand. We have a runner in the back of the room. If you raise your hand, she'll come and get your question and bring it up to the table. The ladies at the table are simply sorting in categories. We have many questions already on the same topic. So what they're doing is just pulling through them so that we get through lots of different topics and have the best possible question to address that particular topic. So, since the mic is down at that end, we'll let you start with our first question. And the question is, why do you think you are the person who can defeat the incumbent? What sets you ahead of your primary opponents?
Well, I believe I already started to answer that question, but let me expound on it a little bit. Throughout a very eclectic resume, two themes have really become apparent. The first is communication, and the second is the ability to solve problems. Those two things are what I want to bring to Washington, D.C. We need representation that will get things done. We can all plant our flags in the sand and say our way is the only way, but that's what's gotten us to where we are now, and the pendulum is just going to keep swinging. We need representation in Washington that are going to work for the good of all people, not play games, not throw bombs, but build bridges and make real progress.
So I think most of us in this room would agree that we need to start sending a lot more Democrats to Washington. But we need to send the right kinds of Democrats to Washington, the kind of Democrats that take working families' issues seriously and that mean what they say when we talk about making the Democratic Party a party for labor and a party for working people again. I can say, as a member of the American Federation of Teachers, I earned my PhD at the University of Michigan. I was unionized while I was doing it. The Democratic Party historically has not been good on a lot of labor issues, and I'm going to change that. We all know that we're suffering from a broken healthcare system in this country, and I've spent 7 years helping rural hospitals stand up against big pharma and the private insurance industry. So I'm going to be a leader on that issue on day one as well. Finally, we need Democrats that are actually going to punch back and punch back hard on the one issue Adam Kinzinger does have an opinion on, foreign policy. Adam Kinzinger wants to send your kids to Iran and North Korea. I don't. My PhD is in foreign policy. I've worked for the Department of Defense, and I'm very much looking forward to having that conversation with him.
In the interest of time, may I suggest that we'll hold our applause till the very end of the forum and just let the speakers answer the question. Okay? All right.
So I don't get the positive reinforcement.
I'll smile at
We need representation that is accessible, active, and accountable. We do not have that in this district, and I know because I've been contacting Mr. Kinzinger's office for more than 5 years on various issues. No one can ever tell me where he stands until he actually votes, and then 3 to 4 weeks later I get a form letter in the mail. And I know that is the experience of every constituent in this district who cares about federal legislation and policy. Through my work, not just with my law firm, but in my community in Winnebago and Boone counties, I've worked with Republicans, I work with Democrats, I work with independents. We volunteer together because we care about strong communities. That's why I've been able to earn the endorsement of 30 locally elected Democrats throughout this district. Because at the end of the day, We vote for people that we've met, that listen to us, that show up and keep their word. And that's what I will do.
Building diverse coalitions has been my entire life. I left the corporate world in order to pursue a career in nonprofit. I've been a nonprofit professional, bringing together groups, explaining differences, allowing labor organizations to understand the challenges that victims of domestic violence have gone through. I've fostered groups like Hate Has No Home here in Plainfield. I have worked to get mosque approved in a city that had already approved it. Building a coalition is important. DC is full of vitriol and anger and hostility, and people who stand and say that this is the way it's going to be. It's time to elect someone who understands that we can work together and make things much better for all of us, which is what I will do.
Okay, the next question, and we'll start with Neil this time. What are your views on DACA and the wall?
Well, we got a minute, so. Listen, my father came to this country as an immigrant. So I don't just know what I feel about this issue. I actually understand firsthand what this issue means to so many millions of Americans. We know that we need to normalize the status of the, well, currently 800,000 or so, going up to nearly 3 million people who either are eligible for DACA or will become eligible for DACA. But we also know that we need to do something about the other forms of immigration that are currently backlogged. They just started processing immigration applications from some parts of the world that were filed initially in 2004. So we know the system is broken. We know that we're losing talent, losing good people who want to come here, be with their family, do the work, and so on. The Democratic Party giving any ounce on the stupid wall, I think, is a horrible mistake. We know that it's not about a wall. People come here when there are jobs, documented or otherwise, and they leave when there's not jobs. Which is why, by the way, undocumented immigration is net negative right now and has been since 2008.
We have 1,800 DACAs living in this congressional district. We have an additional 3,000 who would be eligible for legal status if the DREAM Act were passed. President Obama created DACA. It's not a law, it's not real legal status, it's not a substitute for congressional action. He called on Congress to act over 5 years ago. Congress has failed to do so, including our own congressman, who refuses to co-sponsor the DREAM Act. It's unacceptable. Also, we can't leave out those DACA's parents. They came to this country for a better life for themselves and their children, and we're not going to punish those parents either. We need comprehensive immigration reform. We actually reached our peak immigration in 2005, and in 2013, more immigrants started leaving the United States and attempting to come in. The wall will not stop immigration that is not lawful. What will stop it is if we set up an orderly process that gives people a way to apply to come to the United States the right way the first time. And $25 billion would be better used in infrastructure projects in Illinois.
While our children get gunned down in their schools, Congress debates how high to build the wall. The wall is an impossible, ridiculous idea that will not stop anyone from coming into this country that wants to. We need to protect our dreamers. We need to protect DACA and make it a permanent way for people to get citizenship in this country. We demonize immigrants. We demonize anyone who doesn't represent what we think we should have, and that's not right. 35% of Nobel Peace Laureates are immigrants. That's from 2005. We need immigration. It's what our country was founded on. There's plenty of room for all in the United States, and we need to start acting as if that's how it is.
Like so many of us here in this room, I too have an immigration story. My grandfather brought his wife and 2 young children to the United States in the early part of the last century. Had that been a term then, my aunt and uncle were dreamers. My dad was the only one of that family born here in the United States. And what they did was what all of the immigrants that have made our country great have done. They settled, they worked hard, they achieved a better life for their children and their children's children. And we need to make sure that that is available to people who are coming to the United States now. Immigration is one area where we can be both kind and smart, because immigrants bring growth, they bring much needed economic activity, and they bring population to what in our Midwestern states is a declining and aging population.
And the next question, it's a little bit longer, and I'm going to read the entire question. While I have no desire to deprive my adult son, who enjoys target shooting, or other competent adults of their Second Amendment rights, I also must claim for my grandchildren their inalienable rights as stated in the Declaration of Independence of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is, not to be shot at while they are attending school. This week we heard the sheriff of Broward County, Florida, state that the weapon used in this week's school shooting has no sporting use. It's only used for killing people. If you are elected to be my representative in Congress, how will you go about protecting my grandchildren and everyone else's from gun violence in their school and the fear of being shot at while at school? And we will start with Sarah.
Both of my children attend public school in Rockford. And this is a very personal issue for me. No parent should worry when they send their kid off to the bus stop in the morning that their child might not come home in the evening, because we are not being a responsible community, state, or country when it comes to gun violence prevention. There is no reason why anyone who is not in the U.S. military needs a military-style assault weapon. I respect the Second Amendment. It is just as important as every other amendment in our United States Constitution. But we need to be responsible, just like we are with freedom of speech and the right to vote. So I will do everything that I can to make sure that we are not allowing people in our community who should not have guns to have access to guns that kill as many people as possible within as short amount of time as possible.
I grew up in Ottawa in the country, and guns are a common thing. My dad had to pull out his shotgun to take out a blue racer that was sliding up and was going to strike me. I'm comfortable with guns and I understand them. What I don't understand is why the current GOP has so beholden to the gun lobbies. That is what we need to talk about. Having weapons for self-defense, having weapons for sporting are perfectly fine. And a majority of the United States population wants gun reform. Every poll shows it. We need someone who will stand up to the gun lobby, who will get an F on the NRA's report card. And by doing that, that includes closing gun show loopholes. That allows hobbyists to sell guns without any background checks through the internet. We need to limit the amount of ammunition that they can have access to, ban bump stocks. This is an issue that is extremely important, and I highly suggest we look into it at a first opportunity that we get.
It's been nearly 20 years since Columbine, 10 years since Cole Hall, and a handful of days since Florida. My 3 sons have never gone to school a day in their lives that we didn't know that there was the possibility of mass murder. And those mass murders are just the gut-wrenching, heartbreaking tip of the iceberg of gun violence in the United States. Now, everybody in the US thinks that their views are common sense. What we need to do to begin addressing this issue is give the CDC the wherewithal to study and to understand and to find solutions for this epidemic. That's where we need to begin. And we need to continue with representatives who are not beholden to the gun lobby, not beholden to the NRA, but willing to follow those recommendations wisely.
I'm going to say something strange for somebody who used to be a research scientist at a big university. I don't think more research is what we need. I think what we need is fewer guns. We know what the answer is. And it's embarrassing, especially for someone like myself. I was 18. I was a senior in high school when the Columbine shooting happened. I was the same age as the shooters. We didn't do anything then, and we haven't done anything since. Here's what I want. I think we need to reinstate the federal ban on assault weapons, assault-style weapons, following the legislation in California. I think we should use their definition of what comprises an assault weapon. I think we need a ban on bump stocks or any other modification that uses weapon recoil as a way to create an automatic weapon. I think we need a ban on cartridges or magazines with greater than 10 rounds in them. And then we need to ask ourselves, because we know that will help, but we also know that the Cole Hall shooting would have happened anyway. So what are we going to do beyond that? And I'm asking that question in all sincerity, because I don't think we can stop with what I've already described as being a really aggressive agenda. That requires a broad social movement and big conversation that we're not having yet.
Okay, next topic. What are your views on NAFTA? Start with Amy this time.
NAFTA gave us several opportunities to open up trade within different borders. It also caused some problems as far as labor. It caused some problems as far as what the administration considers unfair trade. NAFTA is not in itself the best option, but I think it can be altered and modified to be improved and be more beneficial for all of the parties involved. One of the concerns is in this area is the farmers. When Trump began talking about taking away, taxing Mexico, they started buying their corn from Brazil, which dropped the price of corn from here. So there is importance to having a free trade agreement, but we do need to look at it and alter that agreement to make it more beneficial for everyone involved. And we must continue to remember we're a global society and that we all depend on each other, whether we're in this country or whether we're in others.
NAFTA, like any free trade, or like any trade agreement, is going to happen with or without the United States. We are a global economy, and in order to have a voice at the table, we need to stay involved. We need to make sure that we are advocating for fair treatment of workers, both our own and globally. We need to make sure that we are advocating for fair treatment of producers, our farmers here in the 16th District and around the world. And we need to make sure that the mechanisms are in place so that trade benefits those people who produce and who work, not just those people who invest and own enormous amounts of wealth and resources.
When I used to teach courses on international politics at Michigan, one of the things we covered, of course, was international trade. And it still boggles my mind because there are actually two economists who won a Nobel Prize in the late 60s for showing that something like NAFTA would hurt workers and benefit millionaires. And now here we are. Democrats in the 90s waved their hands at this, said, oh, rising tide lifts all boats. No, it doesn't. So NAFTA has had drastic and dire consequences for a lot of people. Not all of that is something we can fix now, because unfortunately it has been in place for 20 years. What we can do is make sure that any new trade agreements do a lot better. That's why I opposed the TPP, because it undermined workers' rights. It was negotiated in secret, created all sorts of giveaways for international corporations. It said that international corporations didn't even have to be subject to the legal systems of the countries to which who belonged to the TPP. And that was all conducted in secret. And we all know what effect that would have had on ordinary workers, and that's why it needs to be stopped and then substantially revised.
With any piece of legislation or any contract, you always have to consider unintended consequences. One of the unintended consequences of NAFTA is we completely destroyed Mexico's agricultural market as a result of NAFTA, which pushed farmers and workers, ag workers out of Mexico into the United States because we had a demand for them to come but did not provide a lawful way for them to come. That's one of the major reasons we have 11 million undocumented people in our country who have been living here for more than 20 years. With any agreement, we want to make sure it's fair and it's going to be workable. We want to make sure that U.S. companies are being treated fairly and our partners' companies and workers are being treated fairly. If we don't start requiring supporting workers' rights in our trade agreements, there is always going to be cheaper labor somewhere else. And that's a problem for the United States. So we really have to put our values where our trade negotiations are.
In this district, you will need votes from independent and conservative Democrats to defeat Kinzinger. How do you intend to do that? And we'll start down at that end of the table.
As I've said several times, my background spans a variety of careers, working with a variety of people. I am a communicator at heart. When I was a special education teacher, one of my best things was running an IEP meeting, an individualized education plan, where we took a group of people who sat around a table and made decisions on behalf of a student. And we didn't always come with the same ideas, but we came with the same end goal. And when we start with the end goal, when we start with what we agree on, that's when we build solutions. So I know that all of the voters in this district care about their land and their livelihoods and their communities and families, and we need to frame those ideas. Environment and social services and infrastructure, they're the same things. We just need to be able to communicate and reframe so we all understand that we are, in fact, on the same page.
Democrats didn't stay home from the polls in 2016 because we didn't talk pretty enough as candidates. They stayed home from the polls in 2016 because we didn't do anything to stop the bank from foreclosing on their house. I think if we build a Democratic Party that takes this stuff seriously, that doesn't just wave its hands at things that are happening in rural areas, places outside the cities and suburbs where a party has been too focused for too long, we're going to have a lot of success. And we saw a blueprint for that last year, or last election, by the way. The candidates who did well in both the major primaries are the ones who were willing to acknowledge that politics as usual has failed, the systems that's currently constituted doesn't do well by a lot of people. So the road forward isn't about workshops, it's not about framing, it's not about focus grouping everything to death. The way forward is embracing a platform that puts working families first, puts workers ahead of corporations, and then putting that in front of the voters. If we do that, we're going to be really successful.
I'm going to do my best to knock every door in this district. I have over 200 volunteers that have signed up with my campaign, and the reason why they have signed up is the vast majority of them know my work. They know the work that I did to keep ICE detention out of Winnebago County by building those coalitions with moderate Republicans. They know my work through the University of Illinois Extension Service, and we are going to work with the county-wide Democrats. And yes, There are county-wide Democrats elected throughout this district. And they get elected because they go out and they knock those doors and they know their constituents. That's how we win. I've always said, this is not a red district, it's a pink district. And we're gonna prove it this November.
What's not going to work is politics as usual. People who spend their time on the phone calling elected officials, asking for endorsements, calling corporations, that's not going to work. What is going to work is knocking on doors, listening, and it's a nice idea to say that we start with the end product, but everyone's end product is different. So the first thing you have to do is you have to let people listen. You have to hear what they're saying. Because when we find that we face people who are on the opposite side of us, what's important to them is feeling validated. Like they have a concern, like their concerns are important. And that's why we're angry as Democrats, because nobody is caring about what our voice is. So the best way to build a coalition, which I've done many, many times, is to listen to the other people's concerns, focus on what we have in common, and then move forward with a solution.
This is actually a great follow-up to that question. What should be the priorities of Democrats in Congress in 2019, and how can we achieve that, particularly if we're still in the minority?
I had a great answer until you followed up that last part. I think what we do, regardless of how many people we have when we get there, and I think we will be the majority in the House, I really do. I think what we do is we start with the issues that are on people's minds, and they're the ones that we've been talking about. There's no great mystery to that. We need to build an economy that works for everybody. Part of that is financial protection. Part of it is breaking up the big banks. The dirty little secret on Wall Street, if you talk to people who work there, is that we've done nothing to make the next financial crisis any less likely to happen. And it does start with the fight for Medicare for all. Our current healthcare system isn't just inhumane. It's not just humiliating to people who are sick, which it is. It's expensive. It's expensive. It makes the American economy and certainly our manufacturing sector that much less competitive. We're losing auto assembly jobs from the US to Canada, if you can believe it. And we have to break that link. We have to stop consigning people to get health care only if their boss says it's okay. All of these issues are the ones that brought people out into the streets, into meetings, and those are the places where we got to start.
Jobs, jobs, jobs. That's what it's about. It's always about jobs. And Democrats, we represent working people. We are the party of working families. That's where our strength is, and we don't talk about it enough. So the priorities, the legislative priorities in Congress, whether we're the majority party or the minority, needs to be health care, universal health care. We have to make sure that we're moving forwards and towards single payer and not backwards. We're going to need comprehensive immigration reform. The Republicans in this Congress have shown that they are unfit to govern on these major issues that we depend on for economic growth. And the third major issue is we need to strengthen the right to collective bargaining in this country.
The first priority that I would address is repealing the tax plan that is devastating for everyone in this room. It hit seniors, it hit students, it hit union members, middle class. There isn't one of us that isn't affected by that plan. And any beautiful plans we have moving forward about having single payer and universal health care and immigration reform, all of those things depend on money coming in that we no longer have because of this tax plan. We have to start there. That's number one. How do you get to work across the aisle anymore? Again, an excellent question. What we have to do is then focus on those issues where there was bipartisan support. Russia sanctions. The Congress approved sanctions for Russia, wanted them implemented. Guess what? It didn't happen because of the leader. So we need to find those commonalities, build on those commonalities, and make sure that people understand we have to start from scratch with all the damage that's been done.
A variation on some of the themes that we've already heard, but I think one that encompasses all of them is addressing wealth inequality. The unbelievable difference where 1% of our population controls a ridiculously high percentage of the wealth. Now we need to work on the tax plan, we need to work on jobs, we need to work on healthcare, because all of those things are part of that inequality. We need to rein in a system that benefits only a few, and those few have a disproportionate voice because money is speech, and we need to count on and work for and work with the common voters, the citizens all across our district, our state, and our country to make sure that this system works for everyone.
Okay, a little change of focus. Considering that we spend 60% of discretionary spending on the military, what would you support in the way of restructuring or the way the military operates in order to reduce that amount of money? And I think, yes.
We already have a law, we just don't enforce it. Every federal agency is required to undergo an audit, an annual audit. The Department of Defense is the only federal agency that has never undergone this mandatory audit. So let's start with enforcing the laws that we already have. Secondly, a very wise person said, war is the failure of diplomacy. We have not only have a hiring freeze in our State Department and cut the State Department's budget in favor of the Department of Defense, our only choice going forward will be war and an armed military response to any conflict. This is unacceptable. We have career diplomats. We have decades of institutional knowledge on how to build relationships with people we don't get along with. And under this administration, we have to rebuild relationships with our friends. So we need to fully fund the State Department.
So the landscape of defense has changed over the last 60 years, and unfortunately, we haven't kept up with it. Our wars are not going to be fought with nuclear weapons, hopefully, and with fighter planes. They're going to be fought with cybersecurity, as we see from the last election. We haven't taken a look at what really constitutes terrorism from a cyber perspective. We need to make sure that we're addressing issues that are common for right now, that are hot, that are important, and not focusing on issues like building ships that we don't have a place for them to send. But what is also very important is that we do need to fund the State Department. It is underfunded. We need a head of the State Department that understands that no one wants to put a child in harm's way. We should never take military action unless absolutely every diplomatic measure has been exhausted. And that's something that's really important.
The Congressional Budget Office, if you look at their report from last year, identifies areas where wasteful spending, where unnecessary spending is already, it's identified. We know where that's at. Why are we spending that? Well, the military-industrial complex has a very vested interest in making sure that the legislatures that they've bought and paid for continue to spend that money in districts that they've spread throughout. Now, Adam Kinzinger is like a carpenter who sees every problem as a nail. Only Adam's view is that every problem, his hammer is a bomb. That's his goal. Every problem can be solved with force. And like all of us up here, I firmly believe that the State Department must be fully funded, must be supported, and must be empowered to regain and maintain our standing throughout the world.
With respect, I don't think we need an audit. I don't think we need an OMB report. We know where the money's going. We know the F-35 program, which still can't fly in a light drizzle. I don't know if you know that. The F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which we've been working on for 20 years, still can't operate in the rain. It's cost us $500 billion, and that's before building the planes. That's funny, but it shouldn't be a joke. We know exactly where their money's going, and it's going to waste. So we need to confront those unneeded, over-budget, over-time weapon systems, and then we have to stop our addiction and fascination with regime change in this country. By some accounts, there's 15 or even $20 billion in white elephant projects in Afghanistan right now. Schools that were never used, hospitals that were never finished, highways that not many Afghanis have cars, they're not going to get used. Meanwhile, you know how much it would cost to end homelessness in this country? Wave a magic wand and make sure everyone had a home? About $10 billion. So we need to get our priorities straight, and the defense budget's a great place to start doing that.
Okay. Next question, another change of topic area. How do you plan to address climate change? What can we do to intelligently change course into a better direction?
Climate change, first of all, what we need to establish, we all need to agree on here in this room, and I suspect we already do, and beyond, is that climate change is real. It is a fact. Whatever we call it, humans have impacted our planet. And we need to understand that, and we need to confront it. We need to do a couple of things. First is to break our addiction to fossil fuels. There's a lot of ways that we need to do that, including wind power, solar power, nuclear power. It has its dangers, but it is a carbon neutral power source. And we need to work with the global community to be part of the Paris Accord, to take our role back as leaders of the world and make sure that our science is being understood and being listened to.
It pains me to say this as an American, not at least I wish an American running for Congress, but I think we already know exactly what we need to do, which is to copy China. China has this figured out. They realized that we can speed up the time to getting to that renewable-only energy infrastructure by putting government money behind it. Because we have to speed up this rate of adoption. We know what's going to happen. We know that Exxon, Shell, all the big oil companies are already working on that fossil-free future. But we don't have the time to wait for them. So that's where we need bold leadership, the kind that American politics during the Cold War used to be characterized by. The other thing we need to do is start preparing ourselves for the parts of climate change that are irreversible. Talking about foreign policy a second ago, all of the revolutions in the Middle East and North Africa, Libya, Egypt, Syria, those were all foreshadowed, caused by collapses in the food supply, by food riots, which themselves were driven by climate change. If you talk to people at the Pentagon, that air is already here, and that's what we need to accept.
This is our opportunity to shine in the 16th Congressional District if we have a representative up to the job. The 16th is home to 2 out of the 3 nuclear reactors in the state of Illinois. Now they're aging, and they need investment, which is crazy expensive. That's why we're always looking at solar and wind instead of nuclear. However, just up the road from Rockford, Illinois, in Madison, the University of Wisconsin, they're working on cheaper, safer nuclear fission technologies. There's absolutely no reason why our representative in the 16th should not be working with the University of Wisconsin to bring those technologies here. Our district is the home to the very first privately financed nuclear reactor in the country down in Morris, Illinois. This is what we know how to do, and this is what we should be focused on right now. The other thing is our representative voted against the green energy tax credit, which we need for these solar and wind projects.
Climate change is real. We know that it's going to happen. The tax plan harmed us as far as taking away incentives for consumers to have access to what's my incentive to purchase a SEER 30 rating window versus not. I'm not getting a break on it. Low-lying fruit, easy to take care of. We need to reduce our carbon footprint. Nuclear is one way to go, but the potential for solar energy in this area, the ability for it to maintain, to take up less space, it isn't as offensive as the wind power. With the proper protections and regulations in place, we can power this district for no problem by using solar energy. And as a nation, we need to move forward toward renewable energies. We need to stop our dependence on the fossil fuels. And I do believe we should put in a carbon tax.
Okay, we'll start with Sarah on this question and then go back around. I've lost track of the order. So did we.
We lost track.
We're just going to
Yes,
start.
it's Neil is next.
It's Neil is next.
Now I'm keeping
Okay.
track.
All right. That's okay. So Neil, what are the biggest infrastructure needs in the district?
So it's not just infrastructure needs, it's realizing that in a lot of ways infrastructure is our future. If we think about what's going to develop jobs in our district, infrastructure, logistics, and transportation really has to be at the heart of that. Because other than agriculture, that's what we're best at. We've got big highways, we've got a great and expanding cargo airport in Rockford. We've got, actually our former mayor, some of you may remember, Bessie Chronopoulos, explained to me at depth one night the last summer about how DeKalb's airport is actually, our runway's as long as Midway's in Chicago. So we have that capacity. What we need to worry about then is that any further failure to invest in infrastructure is going to do real damage to our agricultural exports. Right now, it is cheaper to export tonnage from Illinois and Iowa to Shanghai than it is from Brazil. And that's a cornerstone of our economic competitiveness abroad. Once that flips, we're going to be in a real bad place. So whether it's road, rail, canal, it has to be all hands on deck when it comes to infrastructure.
President Trump has proposed $200 billion for infrastructure projects, which basically states and localities will have to contribute $4 for every $1 federal dollar for these projects. And that's a reversal from when we put in our national highway system, where the federal government paid for 90% of the project. Rockford, Illinois has wanted a train ever since we took the train out, the Black Hawk, in 1981. We've wanted it back. Passenger rail service is really important for Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois, Rockford didn't even make it into the Federal Rail Administration's 5-year plan. Not a mention, and that's a failure of representation in Washington, D.C. We need to be investing in transportation. We also need to be supporting our manufacturers and small business. Aerospace technologies in Winnebago County throughout this district are important, as well as I mentioned earlier, nuclear energy. That's really where our district has a way to shine, and those are union jobs down across the board.
There's no doubt our infrastructure is crumbling. Our bridges are falling, our waterways are too shallow. Down in Utica, in Lacelle, right at Starved Rock, the locks and dam system that allows 70% of all our products to make it down to either the Gulf of Mexico or to make it farther downstate is over 100 years old. If that lock system fails, it will be catastrophic for a good fourth of the district. We need roads. 50% of all of the traffic on roads are commercial freight traffic, and 40% of that comes from agriculture. Our biggest and most important issues are roads, waterways, bridges, making it safe. And the important thing is that whatever infrastructure plan, except the one that was just released, we do needs to make sure that it's an open, fair bidding project, that everyone has access to being able to get those jobs, and that we make sure that they go to skilled workers and to union laborers.
I know it might not feel like it, but DeKalb is one of the bigger cities in our district. It's not saying a lot, but. And so is Ottawa, and of course we have Rockford. But when we look all throughout our district, smaller towns are in even worse shape than we are in the bigger cities. Steel and concrete infrastructure is vital, and in addition, I believe that high-speed internet access is the infrastructure need of the 21st century. When our students, when our potential business owners, when our entrepreneurs have a dirt road to get that first mile to the information superhighway, they are at an incredible disadvantage. And so that needs to be a part of whatever infrastructure program we work towards here in the 16th district.
Okay, next question. What is your position on earned benefits like Medicare and support programs like Medicaid? What will you do to protect these?
The great thing about self-governance in a democracy is that we decide who we want to be as a country and how we're going to support our most vulnerable members. For me, we absolutely need to have these social safety nets. When someone works hard all their life, they need to be able to retire in security. That's why Social Security is important. We should be talking about increasing benefits, not reducing them. We should be talking about lowering the age of retirement, not increasing it. But of course, this comes back to tax revenues, which is important. Universal health care. My mother was 62 years old when she died, and she died because she didn't get an MRI when she needed one. You shouldn't have to be 65 years old to have access to medical care to stay alive. I absolutely support these programs. I myself have used Medicaid before I started my law practice when I was pregnant with my daughter, attending law school at night. And I think that I benefited, and I have certainly paid back more into the community, and that's what we do for each other.
Yeah, cutting Medicare, cutting Medicaid, cutting the Social Security net is ridiculous. It's easy for our opponents on the other side of the aisle to be more than happy to say that that's where the money comes from. It's not. What we need to do is expand those programs. Expand programs like SNAP and TANF, not put in place box meals that people have to get. Seriously, like who's gonna decide what's healthy, all right? That's all I'm saying. We need to make sure that we expand those programs, and in expanding those programs, having worked with women who are victims of domestic violence, working in a social service capacity, when you have someone who gets a hand, who's able to have a living situation that's less expensive, who's able to get a good, solid paying job, who's able to become a part of a community, it's a short-term solution. Most of our veterans require food stamps because they can't make ends meet. We need to expand the social services desperately.
I really like the way the question was phrased, the earned benefits. Too often, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid are talked about in terms of giveaways or gifts. These are not gifts. These are the social contract that we have all engaged in. And many of us have taken part, and all of us, hopefully if it's still there when we retire, will benefit from these. These are a contract that we have made with each other, and we need to support. We need to make sure that scaffolding is there in the forms of education and good jobs. And when it is not, we need to have a safety net that will catch our fellow citizens when they need the help.
In a year of really staggering and sometimes depressing political developments in our country, I was really floored a couple of weeks ago when the specter of work requirements on Medicaid came up again. States are going to be allowed to apply for waivers, variances with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid to be able to enforce these work requirements. And I'm still wondering who they're talking about. Is it the 50% of Medicaid enrollees who are infant children? Is it the, let's say, 30% or so of Medicaid enrollees who are senior citizens in nursing homes and long-term care homes? Is it the folks who are disabled? Is it the folks who are only working part-time because they're taking care of somebody in their family who's disabled? Who is it? And the answer is it's nobody. But that's the pathology of the Republican agenda. That's how badly they want to stigmatize, if not criminalize, poverty in this country. And this attack on the Medicaid program is just the first battle in that. And that's why it needs to be opposed by any means necessary. For Medicare, we need to be bold. We can't be incremental on Medicare. If we lower the Medicare enrollment to 62, now we're just having a conversation about a 61-year-old who passes away too early because she can't get the care she needs.
Okay. Now, a big leap. How should the U.S. respond to the North Korean nuclear threat? And that would yes, Amy.
Diplomacy is our strongest potential for not having a nuclear incident. Schoolyard taunts utilizing name calling is not going to help the situation. We want to work with sanctions. We want to work with our partners in the region, making sure those sanctions are enforced to as much as possible. But more importantly, we need to make sure we have an active containment strategy in place should the taunts get a little too crazy, should the two leaders get a little nutty. What we need to do is make sure that our missile defense system is working so that if missiles are launched, we're able to take them down before they get to any of their targets. Those are the things that we need to do. Work on diplomacy, focus on sanctions, focus on building that partnership in the region, making it safer, but also make sure that in the event something does happen, we have a way to protect our friends and our allies.
One thing that does not work is name calling and diplomacy by Twitter. We have all seen that that is not the effective, mature, helpful way to engage with our neighbors around the world. What we do need is strengthened diplomacy. Once again, a fully funded, fully functioning State Department. We do not have an envoy to North Korea. At a time when this is one of the most volatile situations in the world, we do not have a professional who is in place in order to work on this problem. We've seen some degree of thawing. We've seen a glimmer of hope with these Olympic Games. So now is the time to have diplomacy ready. This isn't an easy problem. We didn't start with Trump, and it's not going to end there, we hope. But we need to continue working through diplomatic channels.
The first thing I explain to my students when I was teaching American foreign policy in Michigan was that basically everything you know about this topic is wrong. In the movies, it's all about acting tough, me strong, you weak, getting one over on somebody else. That's not what it is. Foreign policy is about interests and whether your interests are served. The American interest is for North Korea to stop its weapons program, stop the effort to miniaturize its warheads to fit an ICBM. That interest is best served by going to the table without any preconditions. And that, thankfully, is what Secretary Tillerson has suggested. He's been undermined in every turn by President Trump, but Tillerson is right. Then we have to think about how do we make sure this doesn't happen again. The reason North Korea restarted its nuclear program is because we invaded Libya. The reason North Korea started its weapons program again was that they saw what happened to Gaddafi, someone who had given up his own nuclear weapons program, tried to play by the rules. He tried to play by the rules, and the first opportunity we took him out anyway. That sent a message. So stitching back together the nuclear non-proliferation framework is going to be very challenging, but very important.
This is why it's important to have respectful relationships with not just our friends and allies, but every country in the world. We have depended on China for a very long time to assist us with our work with North Korea. Thanks to our president this week, it looks like we might be engaged in a trade war with China. So that relationship is deteriorating. Every time we allow our leaders to hurt our relationships, disrespect our relationships with other countries, it makes us less safe. And I can't think of a better example than North Korea at this time. I agree that this is a conflict better resolved by relationship than nuclear warheads.
Okay. If you are elected, what committees would you most want to serve on and why? Yes, Amy?
Oh, did we start the last one?
No, we're starting at the other end of the table. You're right.
Okay. I'll answer.
Obviously.
I know that going in as a freshman congressperson, I am not going to get the choice jobs. I'm going to have to be lunchroom monitor. I am going to have to work my way up through the system. But the job I have my eye on is the Agricultural Committee. My perspective, not only as a farmer, but as a small-scale, sustainable farmer, I think will be invaluable to the committee that not only works on the Farm Bill, but also has everything to do with the SNAP and EBT program. I also bring that experience to the table in my work as a food pantry manager. So feeding people is what I do professionally. It's what I do at home with 3 boys every day. And it is where I want to serve this district.
I would just as soon sit right down where Adam Kinzinger was sitting up until he loses. I want to be on the Health, Energy, and Commerce Committee, and I want to be on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I want to take advantage of the fact that on my first day, I will be the single most qualified voice in the entire Congress, junior or not, to fight for Medicare for all. And that's the only way you can do it is by being on that committee. And I do really, I talk about foreign policy a lot for a couple different reasons. We need a different voice in that debate. The DC debate on foreign policy right now, thanks to people like Adam Kinzinger, is do we invade Iran now or next year? If it's next year, then you're sort of some sort of squishy, mushy-headed liberal. We got to expand that. We're selling out future generations when we throw trillions upon trillions of dollars away down the drain on these wars. And that's even before you get to the blowback and the innocent lives lost. We need to radically change that conversation. I would love to have an opportunity to help do it.
My goals would be to be on the Judiciary Committee and the Agricultural Committee. The Judiciary Committee, not just because I'm a lawyer, but I have spent more than a decade practicing federal law, regulation, and policy. Immigration legislation originates in the Judiciary Committee. It should originate in the Agricultural Committee because comprehensive immigration reform is at the top of the American Farm Bureau's list every year for years. Our ag industry depends on immigration reform. Also, I'll point out that the Judiciary Committee is also where articles of impeachment originate. The Agricultural Committee is important because the majority of our district is rural. And then the urban area depends very heavily on SNAP benefits, which are administered through the Department of Ag. We need to work together as a district. We all have the same goals. And those are the two committees that I think we'd be best served by.
Our district is very diverse. Agriculture is very important to our district. So again, I would like the Agricultural Committee, but I'd also like to be involved in the Intelligence Committee, the House Intelligence Committee, because we can see right now what has happened with a committee that isn't able to challenge or stand up or even get the information to those who have a decision-making ability to make a change for what we know is going on. As everyone has said, I know coming in as a freshman congressperson, I will not be on those committees. But I do hope that working hard will allow me to get that opportunity.
I think that this is probably going to be our last question. And this one is about jobs. What's your plan to keep good-paying jobs and fill vacancies, good-paying jobs in this area and fill vacancies with people who have the skills to do the work?
Well, any discussion about jobs is going to have, you have to throw a lot of levers at once. I think we do have to raise the minimum wage. And the scaremongering about that increasing unemployment just simply isn't true. It's not supported by the evidence. We do need to invest more in higher education, not just in our four-year universities, but our two-year colleges, as well as apprenticeship programs through the unions. We do need to increase the ability of workers to organize. Because the reality is that employers use openings as a club to keep wages down and to keep people, stop people from organizing collectively to act in their own best interest, and that needs to come to an end. I think we should pass card check, which is something the Democrats punted on in 2008, but it would have made it so much easier for people to organize. But finally, we need to make sure that when people get those jobs, that they're on a level playing field. That's why we need an SEC and a Department of Justice that actually holds banks accountable for widespread fraud. If you get a great paying job and somebody like our Treasury Secretary illegally forecloses on your house, you're nowhere. So we need to address the entire system.
I'm proud to say that I have created 12 jobs. I am a job creator, according to Republicans. Here's what we need to do. We need to invest in small businesses. Small businesses create 2 out of every 3 new jobs. And that's what we need in this district. You know, luring in big corporations with 100 jobs sounds good, and then we hand out tax breaks in the district, property tax, whatever. And those 100 jobs pay minimum wage. Those are not the kind of jobs that we need. We also need to invest in jobs that cannot be outsourced. A lot of those are service jobs. That's another large employment sector in this district. Caring for children, elderly, disabled. Those jobs need to be compensated fairly, and those are jobs that can never be outsourced, and we need them.
The Obama administration did a great job of creating a lot of lower skilled jobs and a lot of higher skilled jobs. What they didn't do were develop the middle class, middle income, solid, good paying jobs. One of the first things we need to do is have an infrastructure plan that does not have privatization involved in it It is an actual public works program that we utilize union labor for. The question also said finding skilled labor. That's a problem. We have many unions out there who would love to go to work, to put people to work, but we have this myth that college is the only way to be successful in this country, and it's not. We need to make sure people understand that there are ways to have great paying jobs with pensions, with security, in apprenticeships, in those union programs, which give people more power, give them control to decide what they're willing to accept and not accept. So infrastructure is one way to do it. Making sure that we can fill those jobs with skilled labor is another.
As a small business owner, as a job creator, I believe that the way that we will truly create sustainable living wage jobs throughout the district is through entrepreneurship. We need to support entrepreneurs. We need a lot of things in place to make that happen. Healthcare. If people were not tied to healthcare by their employers, how many more of us would take that risk and start our own business? We need infrastructure, both physical and internet. We need education. Everything from our community colleges through our universities, everything from preschool through our universities. We need to have solid educational programs in place for both skilled labor, for college graduates, and for everything in between.
That brings us to the end of our question period. We're now going to give each of the candidates an opportunity to make a 90-second closing statement. And we will begin at that end of the table. And and at this point, after each speaker, if you would like to applaud to thank them.
Thank you again for having us here today. What a wonderful turnout. It has been a real pleasure to talk to all of you. I again submit to you that as a rural progressive, I am the person who is best suited to unseat Adam Kinzinger. I know, as I said earlier, that all of the people in our district care about their land, care about their livelihoods, care about their communities and families, and we can work together to make progress, to make change in those areas. I will bring to Congress kindness and intelligence. I will bring communication skills and a problem-solving mindset. I will bring our democratic values that we all share. And I will bring the voters who will put a Democrat in the seat on November 6th. So I ask all of you to please consider carefully. You have 4 good choices, which is kind of a miracle, considering at the last election, Adam Kinzinger didn't even have an opponent. So, we are here. We are ready to serve. I ask that you consider carefully, and I hope that you choose Beth Bercolio Osmond. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here again, and of course, thank you to DeKalb Stands for doing all the organization. This is going to be a really important election, and I know you hear that every 4 years, but I think this time it might actually be true. I'm 37. I thought 2004 was going to be the high water mark. This might actually be worse. And the reason why it's going to be a really important election is that we're not just talking about differences in policies anymore. We're talking about differences in moral visions of the kind of world in which we want to live. As Democrats, we have one particular kind of vision of the world. It's a world where kids get to go to a good school, and when they're sick, they get to go to the doctor, and yes, millionaires and billionaires do have to chip in their fair share in order for all that to happen. But that's a great moral world, and it's the world that put a lot of us in this room to where we are now. Republicans have their own vision of the world. It's a lot more selfish vision. It's a vision where everyone's got to fend for themselves. It's a vision where millionaires, it's not enough to be successful. They actually get to change the rules. They bend the rules to make sure they get even more going forward, so they can add a couple more zeros to their bank account. It's a world where, from the Republican point of view, if it didn't happen to me personally, it doesn't count. We've seen that on women's issues. I know we're seeing it this week in South Florida. Two different visions of the world. And so our task then is not just to vote, but to be the strongest moral advocates for that vision that we can possibly be. And that's why I want to be your representative. My name is Neil Mohammed. Website's neilforillinois.com, asking for your vote as well as your support. And I'll look forward to the mix and meet thing here. Thanks.
My name is Sarah Dady, and I'd very much like to be your Congresswoman here in the 16th. It has been my privilege over the last decade to represent over 4,000 individuals and families in welcoming them to the United States of America, the country that I love best. And here in our congressional district, which runs from Wisconsin to the Indiana border, we are truly the head and heart of Illinois. And we deserve a representative that wants everyone in this district to have the opportunity to succeed. We don't have that now, but we deserve it. And we need to go out there and demand it. That's exactly why I am running for this seat. We need accessible, active, and accountable representation. I built my law practice in immigration law, not because I speak Spanish. Most people are surprised to find that out. But because my clients see my actions. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Do people see you working for them in their best interest? I have a track record of doing that. And I know that I will bring that same work ethic to Washington, D.C. that we all have in the best district in Illinois, the 16th.
Positive change. Years ago, I quit a corporate, well-paying job to go work in the non-for-profit sector. I worked with women who had been victims of domestic violence, and I did more than that. I changed minds. I changed beliefs. I changed beliefs about domestic violence. I changed beliefs about what was traditionally considered man's work, not women's work. Changing beliefs, building coalitions, working together is what I've spent my life doing. We have a chamber full of lawyers and businessmen in DC, and we see where that has gotten us. People who spend time in the back rooms making deals, and we know what that has done. I spend my days talking to voters, listening to the experts in what we need to have done for this district. And I hope you will all join me in knowing that a voice, your voice, will be resonated in Congress. My name is Amy Murray Brio, and I'm asking for your vote. The website is murraybrio.com. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for participating this afternoon.
Thank you for having us. This is
I
we
think-
clap for them. That's amazing. Thank you.
I want to remind you all, early voting is open, but more importantly, March 20th is the actual election day, so between now and then, think carefully, make a choice, and don't forget to vote. And take some friends with you to the polling. We need to have a really large Democratic turnout for this election. So it behooves us all to work as hard as we can to make that happen. Thank you all for being here. We're thrilled to have seen so many of you this afternoon. And the candidates are going to hang around for a while, so you can speak with them. And we are now adjourned, actually 2 minutes early.